What's up, guys? This is Mr. Eldridge. Today we're back with our ultimate review guide, focusing today on Unit 2 of the College Board Key Concepts. Unit 2 is 1607 to 1754. Unit 2 specifically focuses much of its time on colonization and colonial society and understanding the differences between the different regions, how the different European powers are going to colonize. And so when you look at the colonial foundations, there are really 4 colonial foundations to focus in on. First, let's talk about the Chesapeake colony, specifically talking about the area of Virginia. Of course, we're talking about the foundation of Jamestown in 1607, its tobacco economy, understanding what the headright system is, and then, of course, the creation of the House of Burgesses in 1619. Next, you have the New England colonies. This is talking, of course, mostly about Massachusetts. And so we're talking about Puritans. We're talking about the religious motivations surrounding the New England colonies. When we talk about Puritans, and we're talking about town meetings, and then the importance of education in those areas. Next, we're talking about the middle colonies. Of course, the middle colonies is more diverse, both religiously and ethnically. We're talking about mostly about Pennsylvania and the Quakers of Pennsylvania. And then finally, you have the southern colonies, the idea of the plantation economy. You're talking about the aristocratic structure, and of course, the dependence on the institution of slavery. Of course, remember, in the southern colonies, they're going to have the longer periods where they have fertile soil, they have the ability to grow crops for longer periods of time, where in places like New England, they're going to focus more on the idea of fishing and, lumber and various industries that is not focused solely on an agrarian way of life. Also, it is important to understand the labor systems that are involved in the early English colonies, whether you're talking about the idea of the transatlantic slave trade and the idea of the triangular trade with the Middle Passage, or you're talking about indentured servitude. Of course, this is going to be replaced by slavery after Bacon's Rebellion. If you have not watched the Bacon's Rebellion video, please make sure that you watch that. Of course, Bacon's Rebellion being in 1676. You also have the relations with Native Americans, with the English, specifically the Powhatan Wars, the Pequot Wars, and then, of course, King Philip's War, 1675 and 1676. The idea of native resistance is going to become more prevalent in this unit, and so you're going to see some areas of the colonies, such as the middle colonies, focusing more on working with natives, where in places like New England and the southern colonies, less of that is going to be happening. Also, the idea of colonial politics and the economy will play a significant role in Unit 2. Of course, salutary neglect is going to be an important part. Britain largely let the colonies self-govern, and so that idea of autonomy will be important here. You are going to see the rise of colonial assemblies due to that. The idea, very simply, is that if the colonies were bringing in money and there were no outside issues that Britain had to deal with, they're going to leave them alone. Now, over time, we are going to see the creation of the infamous Navigation Acts, specifically the Navigation Acts, whether you're talking about the Hat Act, you're talking about the Molasses Act, you are going to see this become a major key factor in the history of the American colonies. Also, when we talk about the economy of the colonies and the establishment of the colonial society itself, you cannot get away from this notion of mercantilism. Mercantilism is the idea that colonies served economic interests of the mother country and building that economy via trade. The American economy will focus in on trading not only between the colonies creating goods and those going back to England, but also England using those goods as a part of this triangular trade that they are very much a part of. Also, it's important to understand colonial culture when we talk about Unit 2. The idea, especially in New England, this idea of education, the furtherance of print culture and books and readings and, those Enlightenment ideas of Locke and the natural rights that he was discussing, you start to see those things emerging as a true beginnings of an American identity. Colonists are going to be reading books and literature that are going to be important as we move into Unit 3 and we talk about the American Revolution. This is going to be an important part because these thoughts are going to very much influence American thought. Finally, when we talk about Unit 2, we must talk about the notions of religion and society. In the 1730s and 1740s, of course, we have the movement of the First Great Awakening. This idea of religious fervor is going to be all throughout the colonies, but especially in places like New England. You're going to see this furtherance of an emotional religious revival that's going to cause for the challenging of authority. These new lights, as they were called, are going to focus on this notion of you don't have to do the same thing over and over and over again. You don't have to do what the old lights were doing, and you start to see the creation of new denominations, new churches, and we're starting to see the furtherance of what we know today as the American Protestant movement. These colonies are going to begin to become unified, and it becomes an important part leading into the American Revolution, this idea of an American thought and specifically religious thoughts in there. Okay? Puritan influence in New England is going to be very prominent. You're going to see this idea of a halfway covenant. And then after the 1740s and into the 1750s, you start to see a declining religious fervor, but it's still there, and these notions are still there as we move into 1754, the French and Indian War, as we are going to see, and we're going to see these thoughts laying the groundwork specifically for what we know as the American independence movement and the American Revolution. Hey, thank you so much for watching this video. If you have not subscribed to this channel, go ahead and do so now. Check out all the videos on the channel. Thank you so much. Have a great day.